Commander Vathra pressed her four-fingered hand against the cold viewport and watched the stars drift slowly past her dying ship. The collision had been sudden and brutal. One moment she had been charting a new route through the Korath expanse, and the next moment her vessel had slammed into a debris field that no scanner had detected. Now the quiet wanderer floated helplessly in the endless dark, with half its systems destroyed and the other half failing slowly. She turned away from the viewport and walked through the dim corridors of her ship. Emergency lights cast everything in a pale blue glow. The main power had failed hours ago, and now only the backup generators kept her alive, but even those would not last forever. Her species, the Velthari, were known throughout the galaxy as explorers and mapmakers. For 3,000 years, they had served the Galactic Concord by venturing into unknown regions and charting safe passages for other civilizations to follow. Vathra had spent 40 years doing this work. She had discovered 17 new star systems and mapped hundreds of asteroid fields. She had always known the risks. Every explorer understood that one day they might venture too far and never return. She had simply never imagined it would happen to her. The life support console beeped softly and she checked the readings. 3 days of oxygen remaining, maybe 4 if she reduced her activity and lowered the temperature. Not that it would matter much. The Korath expanse was one of the most remote regions in known space. No trade routes passed through here. No patrol ships monitored these stars. The nearest Concord relay station was months away at signal speed. By the time anyone received her distress call, she would be long dead. Still, she had transmitted the signal anyway. Protocol demanded it, and Vathra had always followed protocol. She had broadcast on every frequency her damaged communications array could manage, sending out the standard emergency codes along with her coordinates and a brief description of her situation. Then she had sat down in her command chair and waited for nothing. The first day passed in silence. Vathra spent it trying to repair her engines, but the damage was too severe. She would have needed a proper shipyard to fix what the debris field had broken. All she could do was keep the life support running and hope for a miracle she did not believe in. The second day, she began recording her final messages. She spoke to her family back on the Velthari homeworld, telling them she loved them and that she was sorry she would not be coming home. She recorded observations about the debris field that had destroyed her ship, hoping the information might help future explorers avoid her fate. She documented everything she could think of, because leaving knowledge behind was the Velthari way of achieving immortality. By the middle of the second day, she had accepted her death completely. There was a strange peace in it. She had lived a good life. She had contributed to the great work of mapping the galaxy. Her name would be remembered in the Explorer archives, even if her body was never recovered. She was meditating on these thoughts when her console made a sound she did not recognize. Vathra opened her eyes and stared at the communications panel. A light was blinking, a light that should not have been blinking. She rose from her chair and approached the console slowly, as if it might disappear if she moved too quickly. The signal was weak and crackling with interference, but it was definitely there. Someone was responding to her distress call. Her hands trembled as she worked to clean up the transmission. The frequency was strange, and she almost missed it entirely because it came through a backup receiver that she had forgotten existed. The signal was crude and inefficient, using compression methods that had been obsolete for centuries, but it was real. She finally managed to decode the message, and the translation matrix struggled with the unfamiliar language patterns before rendering the words in her native tongue. Unknown vessel, this is Earth Rescue Coordination. We received your distress signal at approximately 1400 hours. Standard. Please transmit your exact coordinates and the nature of your emergency. A rescue ship is being dispatched to your location. Repeat, help is coming. Do not lose hope. Vathra read the message 3 times before the meaning fully registered. Earth, she knew that name. Every spacefaring species knew that name, though few spoke it openly. Earth was a quarantined world. 200 years ago, the humans had made first contact with a Concorde diplomatic vessel. The encounter had gone terribly wrong, though. The details varied, depending on who told the story. Some said the humans had attacked without provocation. Others whispered that the Concorde ship had fired first, and the humans had simply defended themselves. Whatever the truth, the result had been the same. The Concorde had declared humanity too dangerous for integration into galactic civilization. Earth had been quarantined. No trade, no communication, no assistance. The humans had been left alone to develop in isolation while the rest of the galaxy watched from a safe distance. They were not supposed to have ships capable of traveling between stars. They were certainly not supposed to be receiving distress signals from the Korath expanse. Vathra hesitated for a long moment. The Concorde had strict rules about contact with quarantined species. If she responded to this signal, she would be violating protocols. She had followed her entire life, but she was dying. Her oxygen was running out and no one else had answered her call. The Concorde relay stations had received her signal by now. The hegemony monitoring posts had detected it. The collective listening arrays had picked it up, and none of them had responded. None of them were coming. Only Earth had answered. Only the species that the galaxy had abandoned had chosen to reach out to her. Vathra made her decision. She transmitted her coordinates along with detailed information about her ship's damage and her remaining life support reserves. Then she sat back in her chair and stared at the console. Part of her still believed this was some kind of hallucination brought on by oxygen deprivation. Part of her expected to wake up and find that she had imagined the whole thing, but the console beeped again and a new message appeared. Coordinates received. Rescue vessel Adamantine Hope is en route to your position. Estimated arrival time 18 hours. Conserve your oxygen and stay calm. We're coming for you. Vathra felt something she had not felt since the collision. Hope. She did not know why the humans were coming. She did not understand how they had developed faster than light travel without anyone noticing. She had no idea what would happen when they arrived. But someone was coming. After a lifetime of exploring the empty spaces between stars, she had finally learned the most important lesson the universe had to teach. Sometimes, the answer to your desperate cry comes from the last place you would ever expect. Captain Marcus Chun stood on the bridge of the Adamantine Hope and watched his crew prepare for the most dangerous mission they had ever attempted. The ship hummed around him with the familiar vibration of engines pushing past their safe limits. Warning lights flickered on half the consoles, but he ignored them. They had been ignoring warning lights for years now. That was simply how humanity did things. The Adamantine Hope was not a beautiful vessel. She had been built from salvage and desperation, welded together in secret shipyards, hidden in the asteroid belt, while Concorde surveillance drones watched Earth from orbit. Her hull was a patchwork of different metals, and her internal systems were a chaotic mix of human engineering and reverse engineered alien technology. But she was fast, she was tough, and she had never failed to bring her crew home. Lieutenant Sarah Okonkwo approached with a tablet in her hands. The signal originated approximately 4 light weeks out. Captain, deep in Concorde restricted space. We will be violating at least 17 different quarantine protocols just by entering the region. Marcus nodded without taking his eyes off the view screen, and the source of the signal, unknown species, female, based on the voice pattern's ship, appears to be a survey vessel, probably an explorer or map maker. She has maybe 3 days of oxygen left. Can we make it in time? If we push the drives past their maximum rated output, we can reach her in 18 hours. That gives us a small margin for error. Then push them. Sarah hesitated for just a moment. Captain, you know what this means. The Concorde will detect our drive signature. They will know we have FTL capability. 200 years of secrecy gone in a single mission. Marcus finally turned to look at her. His eyes were calm, but something burned deep within them. A fire that had been passed down through generations of humans who remembered what it meant to be alone. We spent 2 centuries sending distress signals, Sarah. When the Great Plague killed a third of our population, we begged the galaxy for medical assistance. When the asteroid crisis threatened to end all life on Earth, we pleaded for anyone to help us deflect it. When our children were dying and our cities were burning, we screamed into the void asking for anyone to answer. And do you know what the galaxy said to us? Sarah had heard this story 1,000 times. Every human had. It was part of their shared history, now woven into the very fabric of their civilization. Nothing, she answered quietly. They said nothing at all. Marcus turned back to the view screen where the stars streaked past in lines of light. For 200 years we survived alone. We built our ships in secret. We developed technology that everyone said was impossible. We did it through spite and stubbornness and the absolute refusal to lie down and die. And now someone else is out there dying in the dark, sending out a signal that nobody is answering. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was heavy with the weight of history. We are not going to be the civilization that ignores that call. We are going to be the ones who answer. Sarah smiled, and it was a smile that every human learned early. The smile of a species that had been kicked down and left for dead, only to rise again stronger than before. I will push the engines past red line. Captain, we will be there in 16 hours. The adamant Hope surged forward, leaving a trail of exotic particles in her wake. In orbit around Earth, the Concorde surveillance drones detected the energy signature and began transmitting urgent reports back to their masters. After 2 centuries of believing humanity was trapped on their homeworld, the galaxy was about to learn the truth. Deep in the bowels of the ship, Chief Engineer Yuki Tanaka worked frantically to keep the engines from tearing themselves apart. The FTL drive was based on principles that human scientists had barely understood. When they first discovered them, it worked by creating a bubble of warped space-time around the ship, allowing it to move faster than light without technically breaking the laws of physics. The Concorde had similar technology, but theirs was refined. Over millennia, humanity had developed theirs in a single century, driven by desperation and the burning need to escape their prison. The engines groaned, and Yuki muttered words of encouragement to them as if they were living things. She had been an engineer for 30 years, and she understood that machines responded to those who treated them with respect. Just a few more hours, she whispered. Just hold together for a few more hours, and then you can rest in the medical bay. Dr. James Adebayo prepared for whatever they might find. He had studied alien biology from intercepted Concorde transmissions and stolen data files, but he had never actually treated a non-human patient. He did not even know what species had sent the distress signal. All he could do was prepare for every possibility and hope that his training would be enough. The crew of the Adamant Hope numbered 47. Engineers and pilots and doctors and soldiers, all bound together by a common purpose. None of them had hesitated when the distress signal came through. None of them had suggested ignoring it. That was simply not who humans were. Not anymore. The collapse years had taught them what it meant to be abandoned. The long silence of the galaxy had forged them into something new. A civilization that measured its worth not by the power it accumulated, but by the lives it saved. As the ship hurtled through warped space-time, Marcus Chun sat in his command chair and thought about the future after today. Nothing would be the same. The Concorde would know that humanity had broken free of their quarantine. They would know that the species they had dismissed as dangerous primitives had developed technology that rivaled their own. There would be consequences. There might even be war, but somewhere out there a stranger was dying alone in the dark, and Marcus Chun had made a promise to himself long ago that no one would ever have to feel what humanity had felt during those terrible years of silence. He would answer every call. He would save every life he could reach, and if the galaxy did not like it, then the galaxy could come and try to stop him. The Adamantine Hope flew on into the darkness, carrying the hope of a species that had learned the hard way that hope was something you had to create for yourself. Vathra had been drifting in and out of consciousness when the proximity alarm startled her awake. Her oxygen levels were dangerously low now, and her thoughts had become slow and fuzzy around the edges. But the alarm was real. Something was approaching. Her ship, she pulled herself to the viewport, and what she saw made her question whether she was hallucinating. The vessel that emerged from warped space-time was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was large and angular and covered in patches and welds that spoke of constant repair and modification. Strange symbols were painted on its hull, and lights blinked in patterns that followed no design philosophy. She recognized it was ugly, it was magnificent, it was impossible. The communications console crackled to life, and a voice spoke in heavily accented Galactic common quiet. Wanderer, this is the Adamantine Hope. We are preparing to dock with your vessel. Please stand clear of the airlock and do not be alarmed. We are here to help. Vathra tried to respond, but her voice came out as little more than a whisper. She managed to activate the airlock from her command console and then slumped against the wall, trying to conserve what little oxygen remained in her lungs. Minutes passed. She heard the clang of metal against metal as the human ship connected with hers. Then came the hiss of atmosphere equalizing, and the thunder of boots on deck plating. The airlock door slid open, and humans poured through. They moved with an efficiency that spoke of extensive training, working together in perfect coordination. Without seeming to communicate, some carried medical equipment, while others scanned the corridors with devices she did not recognize. One of them approached her directly. He was tall for his species, with dark skin and eyes that held both warmth and steel. He raised his hand's palm outward in a gesture she would later learn was a universal human signal of peaceful intent. Commander Vathra, he said, I am Captain Marcus Chun of the Earth Rescue Service. We received your distress signal, and we are here to bring you to safety. Can you walk, or do you need assistance? Eve stared at him, unable to process what was happening. For 2 days she had been certain of her death. She had made peace with it. She had recorded her final messages and said goodbye to everyone she loved. And now these impossible humans were standing in front of her, offering to save her life. You came, she managed to say. Her voice was weak, but the disbelief in it was clear. You actually came. Why would we not come? Captain Chan asked, as if the answer was obvious. You were in distress. We had the ability to help. What other choice was there? But you are humans, the quarantined species. The Concord says you are dangerous and primitive. You are not supposed to have ships like this. You are not supposed to be out here at all. Something flickered across the captain's face. Pain and anger and old grief all mixed together and carefully controlled. The Concord says a lot of things, Commander. Most of them are wrong. He gestured to one of his crew members, who approached with a medical scanner. Dr. Adebayo examined Vathra with gentle hands, checking her vital signs and injecting her with something that made her head clear almost immediately. Oxygen supplement, he explained. Your blood oxygen was dangerously low. You should start feeling better in a few minutes, but I still do not understand, Vathra said as the fog lifted from her mind. Why did you come? You have no treaty with my people. You owe us nothing. The Concord would have punished you severely just for leaving your own star system. Why would you risk so much for a stranger? Captain Chun knelt down so that his eyes were level with hers. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but it carried the weight of generations. 200 years ago, when humanity first encountered the Galactic Concord, things went badly. There was a misunderstanding, and people died on both sides. The Concord decided we were too dangerous to join galactic civilization, so they isolated us. They put surveillance drones in our orbit to make sure we could never leave. And then they left us alone. Vathra nodded slowly. She knew this history, though she had never thought about it from the human perspective. What she had not known was what came next. For a long time we kept sending signals, Captain Chun continued. Plague swept across our world. We begged for medical assistance. When asteroids threatened to destroy our cities, we pleaded for help deflecting Then when billions of our people were dying, we screamed into the void hoping that anyone would answer. He paused, and Vathra saw something ancient in his eyes. The accumulated grief of a species that had been abandoned in its darkest hour. No one came, he said, simply not the Concord, not the hegemony, not the collective we. Sent distress signal after distress signal, and the galaxy answered with silence. We survived anyway. We rebuilt our civilization. We developed technology that everyone said was impossible. And when we finally built ships that could reach the stars, we made ourselves a promise. What promise? Vathra asked. That we would never do to anyone else what the galaxy did to us, Captain. Chun stood and offered her his hand. We answer every distress call, Commander. Every single one. No matter who sends it. No matter what the Concord thinks about it. Because someone should have come for us, and no one did. And we decided that when we finally made it out here, we would be the civilization we wished had existed when we needed it. Vathra took his hand and let him help her to her feet. Her legs were weak, but human. Crew members supported her on either side as they guided her toward the airlock. As she walked through the corridors of her dying ship, she looked at the humans around her. They were not what she had expected. Concord files had described them as aggressive and unpredictable, prone to violence, and incapable of cooperation, but these humans worked together with seamless efficiency. They treated her with gentle care. They had risked everything to save a stranger who had no claim on them. No, the Concord will punish you for this, she said, as they entered the airlock. They will say you violated quarantine and interfered with sovereign space. There will be consequences. Captain Chun smiled, and it was a smile that held defiance and determination, and something that might have been hope. Let him try to punish us, he said. We have spent 200 years being punished for existing. We are still here, and we are not going to stop answering calls just because someone tells us we should. The airlock sealed behind them, and Vathra took her first breath of human air. It tasted different than what she was used to. It tasted like a second chance. Welcome aboard the Adamant Hope, Captain Chun said. We have a long journey ahead of us, and you have a lot of questions. The Grand Tribunal Chamber of the Galactic Concord was designed to intimidate. Massive columns rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Thousands of seats curved around a central platform where the accused would stand exposed to the judgment of the galaxy. Representatives from 100 different species filled those seats today because word had spread that something unprecedented was about to happen. The quarantined humans had been captured. Captain Marcus Chen stood on the central platform with his hands clasped behind his back. He wore his dress uniform, and his expression was calm despite the weight of hostile attention pressing down on him. Behind him sat the crew of the Adamant Hope, guarded by Concord security forces, and in the witness gallery, Commander Vathra watched with growing unease. High Arbiter Solenis of the Concord Judicial Council rose from his elevated seat. He was an ancient being with tentacles that shifted colors based on his emotional state. Right now they were a deep, hostile purple. Marcus Chun of the human vessel Adamantin Hope Solentis intoned. You stand accused of violating the terms of your species' quarantine. You have admitted to developing faster than light. Travel in secret. You have admitted to leaving your designated system without authorization. You have admitted to entering Concord restricted space, and you have admitted to interfering with the lawful status of a distressed vessel. How do you plead to these charges? Marcus lifted his chin. Slightly before I enter my plea, High Arbiter, I would like to ask a question. Solentis waved a dismissive tentacle. This is highly irregular, but very well. Speak. Marcus turned slowly, scanning the thousands of faces watching him from the gallery. His voice was calm, but it carried clearly through the vast chamber. My question is simple. Why did no one else answer, Commander? Vathra's distress signal. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Solentis shifted uncomfortably. That is not the matter before this tribunal. No. Marcus agreed. But it should be let me tell you what happened. Commander Vathra was stranded in the Korath expanse with failing life support. She transmitted a distress signal on every available frequency. That signal reached dozens of Concord relay stations. It was detected by hegemony monitoring posts. The collective listening arrays picked it up, and it passed through regions patrolled by vessels from at least 15 different member species. He paused, letting the silence stretch. No one answered. No one came. A single explorer from your own affiliated species was dying alone in the dark, and every single one of you decided she was not worth the effort. Silenus's tentacles darkened further. The Korath expanse is outside standard patrol routes. Resources must be allocated efficiently. The commander knew the risks when she accepted her assignments, or her life simply did not matter enough. Marcus asked, "Is that what galactic civilization has become, a cold calculation of which lives are worth saving based on convenience? This is irrelevant," the High Arbiter snapped. "You are accused of violating quarantine, not of philosophy." "Then let me address the charges directly." Marcus turned back to face the council. "Yes, we developed faster than light travel in secret. We did it because 200 years ago the Concord decided we were too dangerous to join your civilization. You put surveillance drones in our orbit. You cut us off from all trade and communication. And then you left us to die." Murmurs spread through the gallery again. Some species had not known the full history of the human quarantine. Others were beginning to look uncomfortable. "You know what happened during those 2 centuries," Marcus continued. "We faced plagues that killed billions of our people. We faced asteroid impacts that destroyed entire cities. We faced famines and wars and disasters that pushed us to the edge of extinction. And every time we sent distress signals begging for help, we screamed into the void, hoping that someone would answer. No one did." His voice hardened. "So we survived alone. We rebuilt ourselves through spite and stubbornness. We developed technology that your scientists said was impossible. And when we finally reached the stars, we made ourselves a promise we would never do to anyone else what the galaxy did to you." Gestured toward the witness gallery where Vathra sat. "We answered Commander Vathra's call because it was the right thing to do. Risked our ship, our freedom, because a stranger was dying, and we had the ability to help. And if that is a crime, then I plead guilty. I plead guilty, and I would do it again in a heartbeat." Chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted at each other in a dozen languages. Some demanded immediate punishment, while others called for the charges to be dismissed. Alentis hammered his ceremonial staff against the podium, trying to restore ordering. The witness gallery. Vathra rose from her seat. Voice cut through the chaos with the authority of someone who had spent decades commanding exploration vessels. "I wish to make a statement." The chamber gradually quieted. Silentis regarded her with surprise. "Commander Vathra, this is irregular. So is everything about this situation." Vathra replied, "But I believe my perspective is relevant since I am the one whose life was saved." She walked down to the central platform and stood beside Captain Chun. He glanced at her with surprise, but said nothing. "I have served the Concord for 40 years. She began. "I have explored regions that no one else would venture into. I have charted paths that open new trade routes for 100 different species. I believed in the principles of galactic civilization. I believed that we were better together than apart." She paused, and her voice grew heavy with disappointment. "When my ship was damaged and I was dying, I transmitted my distress signal with confidence. I trusted that someone would come. I trusted that the civilization I had served would not abandon me. Was wrong. The only response I received came from a species that the Concord had isolated and dismissed as dangerous primitives. The humans came for me when no one else would. They risked everything to save a stranger who had no claim on them." She turned to face the council directly. "I've spent time with these humans over the past weeks. I have eaten their food and heard their stories and learned their history. They are not the monsters the Concord files describe. They are survivors. They are people who were abandoned by the galaxy and chose to become better instead of bitter. She pointed at the gathered delegates. If the Concord punishes them for saving my life, then they. Concord has lost its way. If we have become a civilization that values rules and protocols over compassion and decency, then we have already failed. I, for one, will not be part of that failure. She reached up and removed the insignia of the Exploration Service from her uniform. I hereby resign my commission in protest, and I stand with the humans who answered my call. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Vathra had served for 4 decades. She was respected throughout the sector. Her resignation was not something that could be easily dismissed. Alentis stared at her for a long moment. His tentacles had shifted. 5 years had passed as the tribunal and the galaxy was slowly beginning to change. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed orbital station Horizon and watched a fleet of ships departing for the outer territories. Some were human vessels and some belonged to species that had joined the new alliance. Together, they formed the Interstellar Emergency Response Fleet, the first of its kind in galactic history. Behind her, a door slid open and Commander Vathra entered. She wore a new uniform, now bearing the insignia of the Joint Human Alliance rather than the Concord Exploration Service. Her decision to resign had inspired others, and in the years since the tribunal, dozens of aliens from various species had joined the human. Because the latest reports came in, Admiral Vathra said 3 successful rescues this month alone. A mining vessel in the Outer Reach, a colony transport near the hegemony border, and a scientific expedition that got caught in an ion storm. Any casualties? None. Our ships reached all of them in time. Sarah smiled. She remembered the early days when they had operated in secret, afraid that every mission might be their last. Now they had a proper fleet with proper training and proper support from a growing number of allied worlds. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for. The Concord still has not officially lifted the quarantine, Vathra observed, but they have stopped trying to enforce it. Sarah nodded. Our latest intelligence suggests they are divided. The older powers want to maintain the status quo, but the younger species are pushing for change. Your testimony at the tribunal made quite an impression. It was Captain Chun's words that truly mattered, Vathra replied. He showed them what humanity had become. He made them see that the species they had abandoned had chosen to be better than the civilization that abandoned them. Speaking of Marcus, Sarah said he sent a message from the frontier. The new emergency beacon network is almost complete. 12 stations now covering the entire northern quadrant. Anyone in distress can reach us within hours. The beacon network had been Marcus Chun's dream from the beginning. He had spent the last 3 years overseeing its construction, traveling from system to system to personally ensure that each station was properly equipped and staffed. The beacons broadcast continuously in every known language. This is Earth Emergency Response. If you are in distress, transmit your coordinates on any frequency. Help is coming. No identification required. No payment expected. No species excluded. You are not alone. Those words had become famous throughout the galaxy. They had been translated into 1,000 languages and spread from world to world by travelers and traders who had witnessed human rescue operations firsthand. Some called it propaganda. Others called it a revolutionary philosophy. The humans simply called it doing the right thing. Vathra walked to the observation window and stood beside Sarah. They watched in comfortable silence as the fleet disappeared into the distance, their drive signatures leaving trails of light against the stars. Do you ever wonder what would have happened, Vathra asked, if no one had answered my signal? If you had not come. Sarah considered the question carefully. I think about it sometimes, she admitted. Not just your signal, but all the signals that were never answered. All the people who died alone in the dark because no one came. She turned to face Vathra directly. We cannot save everyone. We cannot be everywhere at once. But we can try, and maybe that is the most important thing. Trying. A notification chimed on Sarah's communicator. She checked it, and her expression shifted to one of focused determination. New distress signal, she said. Freighter caught in a gravity well near the collective border. Crew of 1240 hours of life support remaining. The collective has declined to respond, citing territorial concerns. Vathra felt a familiar surge of frustration. They were close enough to help, but they would not intervene because of political boundaries. Some things had changed in 5 years, but others remained stubbornly the same distance to intercept. Sarah asked 16 hours if we push the engines. Vathra replied automatically. She had done these calculations so many times they were second nature. Now, then let us push the engines. Sarah activated the station-wide communication system. Attention. All hands, emergency response protocol. Initiated rescue teams to your ships. We have people who need our help. Throughout the station, humans and aliens alike dropped what they were doing and ran to their posts. There was no hesitation, no debate about whether the mission was worth the risk. They'd all chosen to be here. They'd all sworn to answer every call. As Vathra walked toward the hangar bay, she thought about how much her life had changed since that day in the Korath expanse. She had been alone and dying and certain that no one was coming. Now she was part of something larger than herself, part of a movement that was slowly reshaping the entire galaxy. The old powers still resisted, of course. The Concord bureaucrats complained about jurisdiction. The hegemony accused the humans of undermining established authority. The collective viewed them with suspicion and distrust. But ordinary people across 1,000 worlds had seen what the humans were doing. They had watched strangers risk their lives to save strangers and ask for nothing in return. And slowly, one rescue at a time, hearts and minds were beginning to change. Vathra boarded her ship and took her place at the helm. Around her, the crew worked with practiced efficiency, preparing for the mission ahead. Most of them were human, but several were aliens who had joined the cause over the years. A Velthari, a former hegemony soldier, a collective defector who had grown tired of watching people die from a distance. They came from different worlds and different cultures, but they were united by a single belief that every life mattered, that every call deserved an answer, that no one should ever have to die alone in the dark, wondering if anyone was coming. The ship launched from the station and accelerated toward the stars. 16 hours until they reached the stranded freighter. 16 hours until they could look into the eyes of 12 frightened souls and tell them what Vathra herself had heard 5 years ago. Help is coming. You are not alone. As the stars stretched into lines of light around her, Vathra allowed herself a moment of quiet gratitude. The galaxy had abandoned humanity, and humanity had responded by becoming the answer the galaxy needed. They had taken their pain and transformed it into purpose. They had taken their isolation and forged it into a mission. And they had shown everyone watching that the measure of a civilization was not its power or its technology or its influence. It was how it treated those who had nothing to offer in return. That was the lesson Earth had taught the galaxy. That was the legacy they were building, one rescue at a time, and Vathra was proud to be part of it. The ship flew on into the darkness, carrying hope to those who had none, and somewhere in the void another signal was broadcasting into the empty spaces between stars. This is Earth Emergency Response. We heard you. We are coming. You are not alone.